And we're up on YouTube.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer. Mayor, can I ask you to do a prayer for us today?
Sure. I ask you all to bow your heads. Heavenly Father, please bless us as we deliberate the employees and the fine service that they give to the citizens of our city, and help us in our deliberations as we do always try the best for our city and its citizens. In God's name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Mayor and other members, just for the sake of transparency, I think it's important for you to know that I've been meeting with department heads along with the chairman of the committee, the appropriate committee. I've started with the fire department along with the chairman of the public safety. I've also had what I thought a great meeting with Kay, where we did some brainstorming, and she taught me a lot, by the way, just in terms of, how we get to where we are. And I just want to make sure that folks know that I am doing that. I'm going to probably set up something with our public works department along with the chairman of the appropriate committee at some point. But I'm just trying to sort of get a feel from department heads what's going on and how can this committee assist them in achieving the kinds of goals that they want. Nothing that is different from what the mayor does daily, okay? But I just wanted to get a good sense of how things are operating in the various departments. And with that, do I hear a motion for our May 12th, 2022 minutes?
Move for approval.
I'll second.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Human Resources to go through the remainder of the agenda. Kay, are you on?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
Okay, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Gregory. I very much enjoyed our conversation Friday afternoon. I appreciate you taking the time to talk some things over with me. It was very helpful. I think the first thing we have on the agenda is we just wanted to give a brief update of our plans for healthcare for 2023. We're not going to go into a lot of detail because, to be honest, we don't have everything finalized yet. But I would like for Jolene to give us an update on kind of where we are this year in the budget, and also just a little preliminary ideas about what's going on for next year. Jolene?
And Kay, for the new people, can you let them know that we're self-insured?
Oh, yes. Yes, sir. We are self-insured, which is very different from being fully insured, which what that means is Blue Cross Blue Shield is our administrator, but we pay all of our claims dollar for dollar. And Jolene Deems is the assistant CFO. She helps us every year doing a lot of number crunching, kind of like Ryan does for employee salaries. Jolene does a lot of numbers, estimates for our healthcare plan, because it's important to try to estimate what those costs are going to be. And sometimes it can be a little difficult to get that exactly right, but I think she's done a great job so far in coming pretty close to what those costs are going to be. So anyway, with that, I will turn it over to you, Jolene.
Thank you, Kay, and good evening, everyone. I just wanted to go ahead and give you a quick overview of where we are for this year. For 2022, we budgeted $23.6 million for our health insurance.
Is anybody getting a feedback? I'm getting a weird.
I think it's Councilman Gregory's computer.
I am.
Thank you.
All right. Sorry, I couldn't hear you, Ms. Deans.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. No problem. So in 2022, we budgeted roughly $23.6 million for our health insurance. And so it's a pretty big number. I work with the actuaries from both Aon, who is our broker / consultant, and also with the actuaries from Blue Cross Blue Shield. And we kind of come up with that number together. It looks like that, at the beginning of the year, we were trending over budget, but it looks like that number is coming down closer to budget. But I do know that we have a couple more large claims that haven't been paid that I've been notified about. So I guess usually we typically wait. We have a better gauge of what we think what the trend is going to be for 2023 after 7 months of claims. So we usually wait until like about August 9th or 10th to finalize our numbers, because at that point we'll have the claims numbers through July. So with that being said, we don't really have an update yet because we haven't received the July numbers yet. We are probably are looking at a different plan option, and we've been working with Aon and Blue Cross Blue Shield to kind of look at that. We're trying to simplify our plan a little bit and try to kind of keep our budget increase as low as possible. So with that being said, also, and this is our last, 2023 will be the last year for this 5-year contract. So in January, we will start the RFP process for looking at a new health insurance for both dental, vision, and our stop loss claims and our administrator for 2024. So that takes us about 8 or 9 months to do that. So the 2023 budget is the last one in the 5-year cycle, and then we'll go out to bid for 2024. So with that, we have a lot of work to do between now and the next HR committee meeting. I know you guys have a lot on your agenda. So is there any questions that we have about the health insurance? Councilmember Shealy?
Yeah, thank you. With those numbers going up on claims, is it claim severity or is it number of claims that seem to be increasing, or maybe both?
We have a couple large claims out there, so it's probably the severity of the claims that is really impacting us this year. We kind of go through a different cycle. This will be the 23rd year I've done the budget, and it kind of seems like that every about 4th or 5th year, we have just a run of bad claims. And some of them are just accidents. Some of them are cancer related. Some of them are just other significant health issues. So, I kind of expected that this year might be a tough year because I feel like a lot of people didn't get their screenings or get their physicals that they needed to maybe in 2020. And so sometimes when you put those things off, you kind of find yourself in a situation where your health situation is more dire because it might not have been picked up right away. So we have our mid-year review tomorrow with Blue Cross Blue Shield. So we'll have some better ideas of that type of information tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Julie. Can you tell me, I guess, maybe break down the plan in broad terms? How much of it do we self-insure part?
We self-insure all of it for the health and their pharmacy and the dental. We're fully insured for vision only.
So what portion does Blue Cross Blue Shield pick up?
Blue Cross Blue Shield is our administrator, so they pay our claims. So the biggest piece of what Blue Cross Blue Shield does for us is we buy their contracts that they have with the physicians and the hospitals and the medical groups, and we use their contracted rates, and then they also pay our claims. So we pay them an administrative fee for the use of their contracts and for them to pay our claims. But the city funds everything.
So Aon, their role is to do what?
they're our broker consultant. So they help us and give us guidance on compliance issues. They help negotiate our contracts. They're very critical in terms of the voluntary products that we have, like our life, our disability, all the other voluntary type products.
So
And so we bid that out. We bid that contract out every 5 years as well. So I believe they will follow the next year. Usually we try not to have them on the same cycle. I mean, I don't have that right in front of me because I'm at home, but I believe their contract comes up the year after Blue Cross Blue Shield because they get us through the RFP process and then we go ahead and bid out that contract.
Jolene, you're correct on that. Heather and I were actually looking at that the other day.
Okay.
So the city obviously collects premiums from employees and then obviously puts in, I guess, the differential to make up this 23.6 million.
Yes, that's right. Well, we bid or we budget for what they are going to contribute to the plan. Yes. So they contribute like around $3 million a year, the employees.
Right. And so our claims have been staying under the amount budgeted.
Typically, we have been under budget. Yes, the last few years. Yes, some years we have much better years. You know, we try to be conservative in our budget because we sure don't want to get in the situation where our claims are significantly above what we budgeted.
Right.
So we try to be conservative in our budget for this since we're self-insured, but we do purchase stop loss insurance. So if we significantly miss our target, you know, we have an aggregate stop loss insurance, which covers all of the claims.
Right.
And then we have an individual plan. So like if somebody is very sick, you know, we pay the first $275,000. And then after that, the insurance kicks in and they cover the rest.
And the stop loss coverage is also figured in the 23.6 million cost?
It is included in that. Yes, sir.
Does the county, I'm just curious, does the county self-insure? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
I believe they're on PIVA's plan. And I know we have looked at that over the years. Kay and Jolene could speak to more detail, but similar to retirement, you can opt to be in their employee insurance programs, but it's very expensive to do that. And then they are fully.
Is that the state plan, Heather?
It's the state plan.
Right.
Yeah. So once you jump into that plan, Councilmember Waring, what we've always been reluctant to do that because you're locked in for, I think, either 2 or 4 years. So you can't get out of it. So they can increase the plans. They can cut the plans. You lose control once you hop in because they want you to stay in. So they have the ability to bid based on a locked number of lives. So you're not allowed to come and go as you want. And so I know for several years, like at the very, you know, when I first started at the city, we looked at it like probably every year for 15 years. And it was just at times it was a little bit better than our plan, but giving up the control and being locked into that plan because there are times when they significantly increase the cost of those plans.
Mhm.
And so I feel like that we have more control over what we offer our employees and we can change the plan at any time. It's better for us to stay out on our own.
Do we know, are we the only city that self-insures?
No, sir.
In the low country? Who else
No.
does? Who else does?
I believe Mount
Charleston,
Pleasant is self-insured. I believe North Charleston is self-insured. I couldn't say with certainty past those two.
Thanks.
Is any
Thank
other
you.
questions?
No, that's it.
Okay, great. I'll turn it back over to Kay. And if you guys need anything, you're welcome to email me or call me. And hopefully we'll have a recommendation for the next HR committee meeting of our plan for 2023.
Thanks, Jolene.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jolene. All right. Appreciate that update. I guess now we will move on to Ryan. has a lot of graphs and charts for you guys to review. He had an update on our current vacancies, what that looks like, our current trend as far as turnover, where we are, and he's going to share his screen with you and go through those numbers. And if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to let us know. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
All right. Good evening. As Kay mentioned, I've got a number of charts and graphs and numbers and slides, and that's just kind of how I do. So to go ahead and get us started, the first item we had sort of requested on the agenda was an update on job vacancies. So to kick that off, we have some numbers to show you on our actual staffing levels. So these are the number of actual employees versus the number of budgeted employees. So the dotted or dashed lines are budgeted. The solid lines are actuals. The white line at the top is non-sworn. The blue line is sworn police. So that's our police officers. Red line is sworn fire. So that's our firefighters, fire suppression staff. Currently non-sworn has about 283 vacant FTEs. So that's full-time equivalents. That doesn't necessarily mean 283 positions. It might actually be more positions than that. Recreation tends to use a lot of part-time. So that 283 might represent a bigger actual number of positions. Police currently has about 39 vacant FTEs. They're pretty much 1 for 1. And fire has currently about 28 vacant FTEs, same thing, about 1 for 1. So beyond actual staffing levels, we have staffing levels as a percentage to kind of show relatively where everyone is at. Again, colors are the same. So we've shown versions of this before. So this is really kind of an update since the last meeting in May. Non-sworn, we've come up slightly, but we are still at about a 75% staffing rate. Police has come up a little bit, so they're at about a 91, and fire has come up, or actually come down just slightly. They're at a 92. But as you can tell from their big jumps, because of the way they run recruit classes, they don't have an ongoing recruitment cycle. So they tend to have a little bit of a drop before recovering and climbing up when a new class starts.
Ryan, I hope I'm not getting ahead of you, but what is our overall vacancy rate? And how does that compare with the normal vacancy rates?
So,
if you understand my question.
I think so.
Okay.
So, I mean, this graph probably does give the best idea about kind of relative rate, just because we actually took this all the way back to January of 2014. So fire, we can see they are a little bit lower from 2014. They were actually kind of right around that 100%. They've come down a little over the years. There was this big drop in 2018, but that was also because we had budgeted 33 new positions for them. So their number of employees didn't drop, but number of budgeted positions increased. But they've kind of recovered. So they're kind of hovering around this 90 to 95. Police, same thing. They've historically been a little higher. They've come down over the years, but they're starting to make some gains, getting back up to those numbers they used to be at. Non-sworn, you can tell we had a bit of a drop, especially kind of right around March of 2020. As kind of COVID started, we saw those numbers start to come down. And again, very small recovery, but not quite all the way there yet. So
Hey,
we
hey,
are,
Ryan.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I'm just looking at the graph. Is there a line that shows what the budgeted staffing level is relative to, police, fire, and non-sworn? Just so like, because I see the percentage numbers, but like where that line would be.
Yeah. So if I go back to the previous slide, so these are the actual numbers. So these show really number of positions. So this is where fire's got that vacancy gap of about 28, police has about 39, non-sworn has about 283. So this kind of gives that best idea of just how close. So that's where fire being about 92, that 8% is really this 28, and same across the board. All right. Any other questions on staffing levels?
So the overall vacancy rate, sworn, unsworn, is what?
So, hang on, I've got another. So we didn't include that number in this presentation, so I definitely have more numbers we can provide, but generally, our sworn staffing average, let's see, bear with me one second. So since 2014, our sworn staffing average has been 93%. And for non-sworn, the average has been 85. So sworn is about 1 to 2% down. Non-sworn is about 10% down over their average over the same period.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, you just went on mute.
I'm sorry. Okay, what is the overall vacancy rate today? Not looking at trends, but in 2022, what is the vacancy rate?
So
Overall.
citywide vacancy
I'm
rate
sorry,
is,
Councilmember Gregory, you want citywide, right?
Yes,
All the numbers together, right? You want citywide.
I got you. So citywide, our numbers are a little old, so it's not quite as of today, but as of about a week ago, citywide, we're at 83%. So sworn, non-sworn, everybody together.
okay, so we're about 18% overall vacancy rate.
Correct.
Okay, and where we want to be is where? 8-10%?
Yeah, I mean, as close to 100 generally as we can get. But yeah, because historically, let me, bear with me again 1 second. So for the citywide vacancy rate, historically, we tend to be about 88. So we're down overall about 5%. That's between everybody. Councilmember Waring?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. What about any departments more exacerbated than others? I know you look at the average, it may be 18%, but so if we looked at public works, for example, area, what would that look like?
So right now, public service does have about a 70% staffing level, so they're vacant about 60%. They're definitely on the lower side. Some of our lower departments right now tend to be stormwater, traffic and transportation, public service, parks, and recreation tend to be kind of our on the lower side. The numbers have fluctuated time and again, just depending on how turnover is gone. We've seen some departments drop. As it happens for a brief moment, our clerk's office actually, I think, had the highest vacancy rate in the city, but after a couple of months, we were able to recover that number. But yeah, generally speaking, it's been traffic and transportation, stormwater, and public service, with usually parks and recreation kind of right behind them on the low end.
So you kind of ran through that kind of fast on me. So public service vacancy rate now is what?
70%.
70?
Yes, sir.
No, staffing level is 70%.
Oh, sorry. Yes, my mistake. Sorry, I have staffing levels, so I keep looking at the chart. Yeah. So they're 30% vacant, 70% staffed.
Gotcha. Okay. And then stormwater is what?
Stormwater is 55% staffed, so 45% vacant.
And most of those vacancies are where? At the lower levels?
Generally, we do tend to see some vacancies kind of across multiple grades, but we tend to have more positions at the lower level, so they tend to have more of an impact. I think especially right now for stormwater specifically, they've definitely had some struggles at the lower levels.
The
Go ahead, Councilmember.
Thank you. Do you all? I'm not just asking this of you, Brian, but I mean Ms. Cross and Ms. Pope, everybody. Do y'all have any recommendations for stormwater or public service to kind of get those numbers up?
We, Councilmember Waring, we actually do have some recommendations, and they're more toward the end of our presentation. So they're a couple of slides away, but we do have a recommendation to present to the committee.
That's great. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I was going to ask just on, and we've talked about it before, but with the vacancy rate, do we have anything that's showing, by kind of year bands. So like, because I think we all know that if you're around for 10 or 12, 15 years, you're probably making the city a career at that point. So on the lower bands, there's probably a bumping up against career potential. And then that's why folks are leaving, and there might be a lot more turnover among the lower bands. And I think that might go across, I don't know, but it might go across the various sworn and non-sworn departments.
I know that Ryan has run reports before on when, and I don't know if you have those available with you, Ryan, that kind of shows the years that we tend to lose the most people. And it's definitely in the earlier years of their employment. Do you have those available, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull the last ones we had up to see where we were at. So we do try to keep track of that. Generally, what we've seen is, so police and fire tend to stay on average longer, just as a matter of course. We suspect largely due to the pay progression their plans allow. So they usually have at least a couple of years of growth, so that incentivizes them to stay a little more. Our non-sworn employees don't currently have that, so we do tend to see them leave a lot quicker. So the last numbers that we had, kind of looking at the average years of service at separation. For our non-sworn employees, that number is about 4. So on average, somebody lasts maybe 4 years before they leave. For police and fire, that number is closer to about 8. So police officers right now tend to last about 7 or 8 years. Our firefighters tend to last about, looks like maybe 8.8 to 8.9 years. So they're tending to stay on average kind of up to that 8 or 9 year, where our non-sworns tend to leave around 4 years. And we have looked at that by pay grade rather than specific position, just to see if there's some relation there. And honestly, we usually see that 4-year average kind of kicks in across all grades. It hasn't been kind of specifically tied to any one grade. And again, we kind of suspect some of that might kind of come back to the progression, because kind of regardless of the pay grade you're in, we currently don't have a system to really advance you in your position. So there's not always a strong incentive. If you're not dead set really on maybe public service being your career, you might have incentive if you're looking for more money to then potentially jump and look somewhere else.
So we don't, and I guess what you're saying is because we don't have sort of performance-based pay similar to what they have with regard to the steps in the fire department, could be a factor in terms of why, especially at the lower end, where there is no career ladder, you can only sort of wait for a COLA or an overall raise, and that's it. But if they had steps or performance-based pay or something, do you think that would be an incentive to keep people longer?
We definitely believe so. And some of our exit survey data has kind of backed that up. 2 of the most common reasons that people are leaving, they either say it's pay, which tends to be number 1, and number 2 tends to be room for growth, or really lack of a room for growth. So those definitely tend to be the two of the bigger measures we see, especially when it comes to our non-sworn staff. And we definitely think that's a contributing factor to why we're losing them really kind of at half the career length as their sworn counterparts.
That question also comes up during the recruitment process. So when we go to make a job offer to someone and we go to explain the benefits with the city, oftentimes we'll get the question of career progression. What opportunities do I have?
Heather, you just brought up benefits. What is the benefit package worth? And when you add that to the current salaries, I mean, in other words, is the benefit package worth $5,000, $10,000 or something, which really, one can look at as a part of their income as well?
Sure. I think we typically estimate that, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, at about a 40% benefit package.
Yeah, tends around 30 to 40%.
That's pretty good.
I think that speaks, Councilmember Gregory, to, especially when we look at the hourly positions, we've had trouble staffing, especially in like sanitation, and folks are jumping for like $2 an hour to go to a private contractor. But, when you layer in city retirement, the health package and everything else, I mean, it's a pretty good overall total comp plan. But, how do we communicate that $2 an hour, 16 more dollars a day might not be the reason to jump, but folks are looking at, the bottom line, like, what does their paycheck look like versus the overall comp plan?
And Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Shealy has had his hand up.
Councilman Shealy.
All right, thank you. Just wondering, Kay or Heather, I guess, how many years before you start to see benefits for being able to keep health insurance and that type of thing? Is there a dead set specific number of years once these benefits start to kick in?
So benefits as a retiree would
Right.
be if you're with the city for 15 years.
15 years. Okay, and
And
that's
you
all
can carry-
positions.
You can
across.
carry those into retirement.
Okay, thank you.
I think our chairman is absent.
Councilmember Waring.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Councilman Brady, you're right, and I guess Councilman Gregory alluded to that as well. It's a very good benefit package. The problem is the lower compensated people, they look at current life situations. They're having trouble paying rent and taking care of kids and buying food. And then you tell them, listen, you got a medical benefit where the city pays, I don't know, $10,000, $11,000 a year for your health benefits. And it just doesn't connect. When you make less than $15 an hour, or even if you're making $15 an hour, your benefit package, I think on the net side is more than what you take home. So if you add up what we put in medical, our match on retirement, disability, sick leave, annual leave, that on a net basis is more than what a lot of these people that dig ditches and, in the sanitation department carry home every 2 weeks. So that's why somebody comes and offer them a couple of bucks more per hour. They take off because they look at that as seeing to the bottom line every 2 weeks, I'm gonna get a few bucks more. They should look at the total package. And I think the city, I've seen a brochure where they add up the dollar value of that benefit package. As a matter of fact, if you add up the benefit package, it may, I bet it equates some of these people's net pay, especially somebody making $13.50 an hour. And the private sector gets them on the cheap because they don't get the same medical, they don't get the same pension program. They get a 401k program that tells them, if you participate, we'll participate. Most of them not going to participate and end up getting the, what they call a thing, safe harbor contribution, which is a 3% contribution. Somehow, those essential workers, we got a drainage problem, and when these ditches don't get clean, it has immediate effect in neighborhoods. Anyway, I'm sitting waiting. I'll sit and wait on the, I guess, on some of the solutions, because you gentlemen are right when it comes to the benefit package being, I think, superior to most. But somehow the lower compensated people, when it comes to taking care of, daily expenses or monthly expenses, that's where the private sector is taking them from us. Anyway,
You are correct, Councilmember Waring. We do have a very rich, very good benefits package, but unfortunately, if you are in the lower tiers and you're just struggling to make ends meet, that you don't, sometimes employees just don't have the luxury of really considering the benefits. They are looking at every dollar they can bring home in their checks. You're exactly right about that.
Mr. Chairman, Amy has her hand up.
Amy, because I don't have the full screen, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to mention too that employees aren't required to take the health insurance. What they are required to do is the retirement. They have no option for that. So just make sure we understand that we don't require people to take the health insurance, but retirement isn't, the state just requires that.
do we get many that refuse to take health insurance?
I don't have it.
We get some that do. And I feel like a lot of times our younger workforce, because you've got the ability under the Affordable Care Act to stay on a parents and children insurance until you're 26, that we'll see the people just starting in the workforce will sometimes not pick it up. And then others, I think that maybe sometimes have options through military, will keep that insurance. But overall, I think most people pick up the health insurance.
Mhm.
All right.
Ryan?
You wanna, yep. All right, on to the next one. So after staffing levels, we have a couple of new charts we wanted to kind of show you. So the first one we've got is essentially staffing replacement. So this is looking at really our overall attrition, positive or negative, since January 1, 2014. Fires on the left in red, police in the middle in blue, non-sworn on the right in white. So the charts start at 0. So then the colored numbers to the top represent how many new hires. The yellow numbers at the bottom represent how many separations. And the gray line in the middle represents essentially cumulative growth. So that's since January 1, 2014, how is our staffing level compared? So fire, we can see they kind of had a small dip 2015 to 2017, or really through 2018. But in 2019, they brought on a very large class, and they've essentially been able to kind of maintain that level of staffing kind of since. Police in the middle, we're going through a bit of a drop 2014 to 2019, but since then, their numbers have been starting to recover. So we're seeing them kind of catching up. And really kind of for police, they've had about the same number of staff. So really we would want to see them either around 0 or maybe just slightly above it, because that shows that they're really replacing people. Fire more or less the same, but they did have that big class. So we would have expected their number to go up, which it did. But then on non-sworn, we see the number was going up slightly kind of through 2018, but it's been on a downward tick, and 21 and 22, our cumulative growth line actually went into the negative. So since 2014, we actually now have fewer staff. And at this point, we're actually, our replacement rate is kind of just in the negative. So we're having more separations than we're having hires. So we're not quite keeping pace with the people that are leaving, but also over the years, we've added positions in the budget. So really, we would have expected our replacement level to be more in the positive to keep up with those positions. So we are just slightly behind as far as what you would call like a replacement rate would be.
Mr. Chairman. So Ryan, I have to ask the elephant in the room question. So, a lot of us are getting tagged in Facebook posts and other media and whatnot on the firefighter staffing issue. And so, I just kind of have to ask then, where is the disconnect kind of coming from in terms of what some of the firefighter union folks are saying versus, kind of what you're presenting here, that, in terms of the graph, the staffing level doesn't look necessarily as bad as it's being made out to be.
I don't know that I can totally answer that question if I'm being honest. Again, our numbers kind of illustrate that same thing, even looking back to their staffing level. And if we look all the way back to 2014 and 2015, their staffing level was definitely a lot higher. So maybe if it's kind of relative to that time period, and I might actually take it back very briefly. So 2014 and 2015, the red line, they were definitely a little higher. But kind of since 2016 and 2017, their staffing level has remained relatively stable. They did add 33 new positions here in 2018, in effect to acknowledge new stations coming online, which it did take a little time to fill, and their numbers it definitely hasn't recovered to where they were kind of in that, say, 97% range. But I mean, it has been relatively stable kind of really since 2019. So I can't totally answer the question as to exactly why it's coming up now. Their staffing is definitely not exactly where we would want it to be, but really the same is true kind of across all three of our groups of staff. Police, same thing. You can see police staffing has come down slightly and hasn't totally recovered. And really for non-sworn as well, we kind of had this peak in 2018, but then our non-sworn staffing has also gone down. So they've seen a little bit of a drop, which is relatively consistent, but otherwise they've been holding relatively steady. So that's, I think, the best answer I have.
But the issue for them is not necessarily staffing level, is it? For the fire department. It's shift issues. It's pay.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not, I don't think it's the staffing level that's the issue. And I do think that they're doing a pretty good PR campaign, actually, even if everything's not quite consistent with the numbers we have.
And they also have a class coming on right after Labor Day that will start, and will help with that as well.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me follow up on your point. What I hear a lot is compensation. I know we showed our study, I think, at the last HR meeting, but have we actually gotten, has anybody, this may not be the committee for this, but requested from the, I guess I asked this of Mayor Tecklenburg, from Chief Courier, what does he think the compensation band should be? When we've got ours from HR kind of comparing, various cities to ours, which was understandable. What does Chief Courier, if I were to ask Chief Courier, where does he think his people should be compensated? What would his pay class be compared to what HR is saying?
Would be happy for the chief to be able to come speak for himself in the department, but generally my communications with him is consistent with what I feel for our entire workforce, given the labor market today, is that we need to increase our wages, our pay for our employees, both fire department and otherwise. It seems that it falls into two categories, council member. One is the starting pay, and in fact, that's what Kay was hinting at, that we'll have in another slide or two. We'll address that now, and then there's the long-term issue of just where we stand compared to other cities and jurisdictions in the marketplace. And Brian had a pretty comprehensive study on that at a recent meeting, and we're going to continue to work on that until we get to the 23 budget. And I know there's been good communication from our firefighters, but really, I believe it really applies to all city employees. And importantly, and Mr. Chairman, thank you for taking the time as chairman to do as you described early in the to meet with the department heads and Kay the other day. If you don't mind muting again, there you go, thanks. Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, could we try getting you another computer? Because there's something particular about your system, it seems to me, that feeds back all the time. But that's another issue, maybe.
I'm on mute.
No, I mean, when you're not on mute is when we get the feedback, and it might be worth just trying another computer and just seeing if if it's that particular unit you got. But anyway, the thought of having a more pay plan for our non-sworn officers that's based on both longevity and performance, I think is what we need to move to. And I know, Mr. Chairman, you've been talking about that for years. It's time for us to try to start that next year, I believe. And so anyway, that's a conversation I know we're going to have throughout the budget season this fall. Today we're going to talk about just some additional resources to help us on the very starting salary levels. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Gregg has his hand up.
Councilman Gregg.
Yes, I was looking through our slides from the last HR committee meeting. And so it seemed like the bigger discrepancy was not with the on pay discrepancy when you did the survey comparing us to other governments in the region. The bigger discrepancy lied with the non-sworn employees than the sworn employees. Am I correct in saying that?
That's correct.
So we kind of rank a bit lower on compensation in non-sworn, and I mean, I think that shows itself in this trend line where the non-sworn we have a much greater vacancy rate there. So I mean, I understand we need to address it across the board, but it seems like, and certainly in the folks I talk to, the vacancy rates, it's a big problem with not having the correct number of folks trimming trees in the community, and certainly at Public Works as well.
I totally agree with you, Councilmember Gregg. That is where we're seeing our most significant challenges. Having said that, we do recognize, with the cost of living being what it is, I mean, we do want to have a significant increase, hopefully, for all employees in the 2023 budget. But we are definitely have more of an issue with non-sworn than we do sworn. And I think, and it really just, having the conversation with Councilmember Gregory on Friday, and it seems pretty clear that what has happened is because fire and police have so much progression built into their plans with the step increases, they've been able to keep pace a little better with things as they go up. Whereas with non-sworn, there's just no mechanism in place for them to move through their pay grade. And I think that's why we have dropped, as low as we have. But again, we have some recommendations for now. We also have, some preliminary recommendations for next year. So I'm very encouraged. So I think that, I think we're in a place where hopefully we can make some headway, and maybe the next time Ryan does these graphs, hopefully we'll see a little bit a better trending up. But anyway, thank you for your comments. But I do, yes, you were right. That is where our main problem is right now.
I'll wait to hear the recommendations, but before I ask my next question, I guess.
All right, so barring any other questions, do we want to keep going through job vacancies? And I'm going to take that as a yes. All right. So we looked at staffing replacement rate. So we have some recruitment data next. So we moved to a new recruitment system towards the end of last year, which has been able to provide us a little more data than our last system has. Not all the data we want, but a much better view of it. So the first chart we have here, we're looking at really three different things. We're looking at number of job postings, which is the blue line. And then we're looking at how many people viewed those job postings, which is in gray, and then how many people actually applied to those postings, which is the number in orange, which you can't always see. But overall, this has been consistent. We've talked about a thing called conversion rate in the past, about the percentage of people that end up applying. We're seeing that trend more or less continue, which the next slide will talk about that measure specifically. But you can see, we do attract at least a reasonable level of attention. Apparently something in February made it very attractive for people to look for new jobs. So we kind of had our biggest number there. But those numbers, again, we don't have a lot of historical data, so can't speak to trends, but at least gives us some idea of how many people are looking at our positions. And then in blue gives you an idea of how many positions we have posted in a given month. So this isn't necessarily positions that are posted at the same time. It's just positions that through the course of the month we have advertised. So for example, the month of July, we had essentially 216 different jobs posted at one time or another. We had about 37,500 people look at those, and we ended up with essentially 487 applications for those jobs. The next slide shows a little more detail on some of that information. So we tried to distill it down into two measures: average applications per posting, how many people on average do we actually get to look at? And then conversion rate, which is really telling us how many people does it take to look for us to get an application. So the number in orange is that average applications per posting. We can see February, we had a lot of people and we ended up with a lot more applications per posting. But even in February, we really had a total of 5. So for any average job that was posted, our hiring managers had on average about 5 applications to review. For July, we've seen that number come back down. So July, we hit just a little over 2. Because the average applications is kind of a function of how many people we have looking, we also look at the conversion rate, how many people actually clicked apply after looking. And we can tell that that number has held more or less relatively stable. July was 1 1/3. April and June were a little higher. February was actually a little lower, just had that many more people. December and January were about 1%. Really, our target for a conversion rate is closer to 10%. So we're definitely a little lower on that end. The best guess of kind of what that means, it's really attractiveness. It's how attractive does the job look to someone. So we know they're clicking on the jobs to look at them, but then they're not necessarily following through to apply. So 1%, really doesn't tend to get us a lot of people. That really means for every 100 people that look at the job, 1 of them ends up applying. So that number is a little lower than we would like. For some positions, it tends to be a little better. For other positions, it tends to be worse. So this is just kind of that average across the board look, given this new data we're able to have access to. Councilmember Shealy? Sir, I believe you might be on mute.
Sorry about that. Okay. So when we're posting these jobs, are we posting them out there? I'm trying to figure out, I guess, if a lot of people looking at these are actually looking for jobs, or are these just people just kind of coming across this seeing, or is this somebody that's going to Indeed or somewhere like that? Where are these showing up, and are these people actually looking for jobs, I guess?
So they do get picked up by Indeed through posting through NeoGov. They show up on government jobs, but they are picked up by Indeed as well. But
these numbers are only the people who've actually clicked through. So if somebody's looking on it on Indeed, we don't have any tracking information for that. If they actually click on the job in Indeed and come to our site, that's when they show up in our statistics. So there's definitely going to be some degree of people who are just kind of browsing, which is why we definitely don't expect a particularly high conversion rate. But these are people who have made it to the city's particular website. They have made it to the page that really has the apply button on it. So they've gone more than just browsing through the listing or browsing through Indeed. They have made it to that specific job in some form or fashion.
Okay, thank you.
And then to kind of build off of that idea, we did want to mention just some of the other recruitment initiatives that we had as well.
So we have done, in addition to the city hosting its first job fair in April, we've done a number of job fairs so far this year. We participated in 8 job fairs to date. We've also been working with the local workforce reentry programs. Turning Leaf, or now called Turn 90. We've worked with them for a number of years. We've also reached out to Fresh Start, and we are going to communicate with Second Chance, which is another reentry program, and trying to identify some more applicants. We've looked at adjusting sign-on bonuses. So some positions we had sign-on bonuses for our CDLs, but we've increased that to $1,500, and that's our drivers, and that includes mechanics that require CDL for those positions, and also seasonal lifeguards. We've done that the last 2 summers, addressing that with sign-on bonuses. We've increased our employee referral bonus from $150 to $300, and we've seen more referrals come in, a good many since we made that adjustment in April. We've also been advertising on various things that we own. We thought that as long as there are buildings, are fences, ball fields, et cetera, we've made banners that include the link to our job postings to promote that as much as we can. And we've reallocated money to our advertising budget for recruitment. We've taken it from $3,900 to $20,000, and we've used that to advertise on various media, including social media. So we have taken a lot of our jobs and promoted them on LinkedIn and posted them on LinkedIn, and seen some applications come in through that, particularly for our more administrative positions. And then also promoting on Facebook, using the city's Facebook page, and then also posting jobs through Facebook. We have had recruitment strategy meetings with various departments, because it's not really a one size fits all for trying to fill certain positions. So sitting down with that department head and looking at what jobs they have out there, have those jobs been reviewed? How quickly are people being interviewed? Are there other places we could be targeting recruitments for those departments? And then reviewing with them also the minimum posting requirements for certain positions, because it may make more sense to adjust that minimum and then bring someone in and train them versus requiring a higher level of education or a good bit of experience. We've worked with local media, and we've been featured on Live 5 News. We did that with the mayor a few weeks ago with the Working Wednesdays. And next week, we're going to be on Fox 24 promoting our city jobs. And then lastly, working with staffing agencies. So I know we had talked, Councilmember Waring had mentioned stormwater positions. We have worked with them to fill some positions, or people coming on and I think within the next week or so to help with the ditch crew, also grounds custodians. We've worked to fill 3 CDL driver positions with the staffing agency and 2 grounds custodians. And those are just some recent hires are upcoming in the next week or so.
Question. From vacancy to hiring, what's the average time frame?
Ryan, do you have that? If not, we can definitely get that to you.
Okay.
I think that is one issue we've identified, Councilmember Gregory. I'm glad that you brought that up, that right now, because the job market the way that it is, that if a position's out there, really to get a candidate into that role, you've got to be looking at those positions pretty quickly and interviewing people, because we're finding a lot of times when that doesn't happen, you get to the offer stage and they've already taken another job.
Right. Thank you.
All right. And so then, as far as we're talking about vacancies, one of the last kind of pieces of the puzzle is turnover. So we do have an update on turnover. This first slide is just a reminder essentially of where our turnover was. So this is 2014 to 2021, just through year end. Again, really just kind of a reminder, so kind of see where we were at. And then as far as where we are through the year, so this slide we're looking at total turnover through July of each year. So this is January 1 to July 31 of 2014 all the way up through 2022. So over that same time period, what does our turnover look like? Again, it's nothing terribly shocking as compared to our previous meetings. Non-sworn turnover continues to run a little bit high. So through the end of July, we'd seen about 15.3% non-sworn turnover. Fire has come up slightly, so they're at about 5.5. Police, same thing, they've come up slightly over last year for about 4.9. Generally, fire and police over this period since 2014, they're kind of still hovering around their average. Fire in particular, 2020 and 2021 were pretty good years turnover wise. So they're definitely coming up a little bit, but that may just be essentially a return to the average or a regression to the mean. Police, same thing. 2021 was a better year, so they're coming up slightly. And then non-sworn, again, 2020 was a pretty good year turnover wise, but then that number recovered very quickly and has kind of continued on an upward trajectory. Given the turnover last year, it basically blew all of my projection models to shreds. So we've tried to run a couple different ones just to try to project what turnover might look like through the end of the year. So our first projection, we're looking at turnover really based on the historical trend. So we're looking really 2014 to kind of 2019. How did our turnover tend to be by this point of the year? So 2014 to 2019, by this point in the year, we're 7 months through the year, our turnover has tended to be about 60%. So we would have hit 60% of our turnover by now. If that trend holds true, this chart shows you where we would be. So fire, we would see kind of at about 9.7. So a little higher than the last few years, but definitely not as high as 2014 to 2017 was. Police, a little lower than their average, coming in just kind of at a 9.2. But then non-sworn coming in about 26.8, almost 27%. This is just a projection, but projection based on historical trend. I think it is worth noting that if our 2022 projection holds true, or even if it is just a little high, we will have seen 50% turnover since January of 2021 in our non-sworn employees. So really you lost kind of 1 out of every 2 people. And then, not to end on a super positive note, we have the projection using the prior year trend. So 2021 was really weird. And I don't know if it was an outlier or if it might be more of the new normal. Again, my projection models were totally ripped to shreds by 2021. So this projection looks at what happens if 2021 is the new normal. And really what happened in 2021 was by this point of the year, historically, we would have seen 60% turnover. In 2021, by this point of the year, we saw 40%. So all of a sudden last year, we saw a huge percentage of our turnover in the last half of the year. If that holds true, these are the numbers we would expect to see. So fire would come in around 13%. Wouldn't be their highest ever turnover, but would be close. Police would come in a little over 13, which actually would be their highest for this period. And non-sworn would be the highest number I've ever seen. I'm hoping this projection does not at all come to pass. But again, last year was just so weird. And I think things have shifted so much. I don't know if 2021 is the new normal or not. I hope that it's not. But if it is, this is potentially what we could be looking at.
Ryan, is it possible to put a figure with the turnover? And by that, what I mean is, if we have that higher turnover rate, given the training and all the other things that we have provided to these people, can you put a dollar sign on that?
It's always been very hard for us to. I think there are some studies out there that have tried to ascribe kind of an average dollar amount to them. I can't say what they were off the top of my head, but we can go back and pull some of that data and see if we can maybe come up with a ballpark figure. But it would still be a very rough estimate, just given the nature of kind of the variety of all of our positions. It's hard to give us a more specific number.
just give us a good idea of, that's all I'm talking about. It
Yeah,
doesn't
well-
have to be exact.
Well, we'll go back and kind of pull some of the research we've seen on really what that attrition cost is and see if we can ballpark a number for that.
Thank you.
And then this is really the last slide I have as far as just purely talking about job vacancies. I know there's been some talk about recommendations, so we do have some of those coming up. But at least for the sake of the agenda, we kept all the vacancy information kind of under one heading. So barring any further conversation on that, we will move forward to the job reclassifications.
Okay. As I alluded to earlier in the meeting, we do have some recommendations and we know this is not going to fix everything, but we do think this is a very positive step in the right direction. And the ideas came up pretty quickly. We were able to talk to the mayor and get Amy's support. And Councilor Gregory, this is like a great follow-up from our conversation on Friday. We know that we should $14 is low for starting pay, and we've been trying to get to 15 for a while. So we're proposing that we do just that mid-year, as soon as possible. We want to basically eliminate grade 6 is right now where we're starting at grade 14, roll all of those employees who are in grade 6 into grade 7. That will also require us to move some of who is in 7 into 8. That's still going to give us just a little more compression than we like, but we think that the benefit from that is worth maybe having a little more compression for just the rest of the year. And then, of course, we would have the opportunity to, address that in the budget process for 2023. So what we're proposing is everyone in grade 6 goes to $15 an hour. That includes your construction workers in stormwater. That includes our grounds custodians, our grounds keepers. Also includes, our lifeguards, our recreation leaders. So there's a lot of employees who will be impacted by this. We're really hoping it'll help with our recruitment efforts. With that, we also, when we did the survey, we noticed that even though we have very rich pay plans in the police and fire department with really great progression with all the steps, our starting pay had fallen just a little bit because some people around us have taken some pretty aggressive moves in getting their pay increased. So we're also recommending increasing the starting pay for police officers as well as firefighters to what you see on the screen. Again, we know that more needs to be done, and we definitely plan on working really hard to make that happen. But I think that getting our starting pay moved up across the board for all employees right now, you can see the total cost is $428,000. And Amy has amazingly, wonderfully approved this funding. So I really hope that you'll support us in making this change. Again, we'd like to make it as soon as possible. We do think it will have an impact. Does anyone have any questions?
So if we do this right now, is there what would it look like in what we're proposing for the upcoming budget cycle, or have we not gotten there yet?
We have not really gotten there. I mean, if you'll remember, Ryan did throw out some options for what it might take to get us to competitive pay rates across the board. But I think we've got a little more work to do putting this in place. It obviously takes us a little closer to where we want to be. But as Amy, said this morning, and I'll let her talk about this as well, but by doing this, we are committing to, the $15 an hour and the changes we're making now, and we will have to build upon those for next year. So Amy, can you kind of explain a little bit more about the budget process and how that works?
So yeah, so whatever this cost here, what we're doing, we'll have to move forward to the 2023 budget. So what we would basically do is add this to the base budget for next year. It'll already be a cost that everybody's agreeing to take on for 2023. There's some compression issues in this, and it's like minor ones we're taking care of in this, what we're proposing here. But because of the compression issues that we've talked to y'all about a lot, we will have to fix them in 2023. So committing to this is also committing to fixing at least those progression issues into 2023. I mean, we've all talked about that we need to do something bigger for our employees anyway. So I don't think that would be a problem, but we would have to commit also to fixing any major compression issues that we see by collapsing that pay grade, and what it will do to supervisors that are really close to their employees at that time because of what we're doing now. So just so you know, we are committing to funding going into 2023 by doing this. Does that answer the question? I hope.
I mean, it answers mine. I mean, I just think that it's very creative and it's immediate. And I do think that the kind of good press, for lack of a better term, that we would get from this will go a long way. It makes us a bit more competitive with the other surrounding jurisdictions. So I think it's a very creative and a good approach for us to undertake at this time to deal with the issues that Councilman Waring brought up with regard to the ditch diggers and others that are in that category. We're going to bring them all up at the same time. And I just think that that's a very creative way of approaching this. I don't know what anybody else feels, but I'm ready to make a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember Gregg.
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Gregg has his hand up, and I would like to make a comment as well.
Yeah, Councilman Gregg, and then the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions. One on the non-sworn. So starting pay goes from $14 to $15 an hour. And I know that in the presentations from a couple of months ago, our average starting pay ranked 51st percentile or 51st percentile. And then when you factored in cost of living, we were in the 69th percentile. So where does that get us on the benchmark? Ryan, do you have that number? I mean, does this move the needle on the percentiles?
I don't have the exact number, but to be honest, it does not move the needle much. So that ranking that we had looked at was the average really across all of those positions we surveyed.
Okay.
This is very much a first step where we're really addressing one of our non-sworn pay grades, and we really have 13 of them. Okay. So we're really only addressing kind of 1/13 of our starting pay, but this is the grade where we have our ditch crew workers, we have our garbage collectors, we have our park staff. So I think at this point we kind of targeted them as potentially the most in need, but this would very much be a first step to starting to try to bring that number up.
So I guess this may be a question for Amy, but Amy, to get to the top 25% number, we had a preliminary estimate of 17 million across the whole city staff. And so obviously this isn't that. But I guess my question is, have we looked at, I mean, we've got all these vacancies. Have we looked at reallocating? I mean, we're not going to get, if you look at the vacancy rate over the course of the last, 8 years, we're never going to get to 100%. Have we looked at rebudgeting those positions and reallocating that money to salaries or pay for city employees instead of assuming we're going to get to 100%, we're going to do more with less, but we're going to pay our people more. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. The weird thing about our budget though, is we always budget for salary savings based on the vacancies. So when you're doing that, it's like for us to reallocate, that's not going to really save us a whole bunch of money because we're already budgeting for that savings amount, if that makes sense. It's always a negative number in our budget and something that we use to help us balance the budget. So our salary savings numbers the last couple of years have been much higher than they have been in the past because we know we have so many vacancies. So for 2022, we budgeted a $6 million salary savings number.
Okay.
Am I making sense?
Yeah, maybe I'll reach out to you separately to get some more clarification on that. I don't want to bog everybody down with the new council member questions. So.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that some of that wouldn't work, Councilmember Craig. I just don't know that it would reap the biggest as much as everybody thinks, just because we do budget that way. So, but we can talk about it further.
Yeah, I think where I guess where I'm coming from is, I've talked to Jason at the Parks Department about, we don't have tree trimming crews. Talked to Matt again. We've talked about the ditch diggers. We know we've got huge vacancies in public works, and it's going from $14 to $15 an hour. Going to move the needle for those guys, or and that's where I'm. We could do this, and it might not make much of a difference. And I just wonder if we can't reallocate money from budgeted positions to try to improve this a little bit on the non-sworn side.
So even for us doing this right now, because we're predicting that like I said, we budgeted $6 million in salary savings. We're predicting that we're going to be well above that because of what our salary savings is, which is going to help us pay for what we're doing this year.
Okay.
But we've talked with departments. We have been doing some of that reallocation and trying to combine positions. We've been doing a lot of that as well in certain departments anyway, just trying to get them what they need. So there is a little bit of that going on right now as well. So anyway.
Amy, if I'm correct, I'll get back to you, Mayor. I'm sorry. If I'm correct, what you're saying is that this 428,000 is coming from vacancy money. Am I correct?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So we are doing this. This is the test, Greg, of doing exactly what you said on a bigger scale. Again, I think we're going to have to look at that, but this is the test.
Thank you.
Mayor?
So I wanted first just to thank Ryan and Kay and Heather and Amy for working on this. And to you, Mr. Chairman, I think your inquiries and discussions helped with the brainstorming that led to this. I'll reiterate, this is just a first step. We need to do more for next year's budget to address the compression that was mentioned, but also on the non-sworn side, particularly to have more of a pay plan and some incentive or performance-based features for our employees, for our non-sworn employees. So, but again, this is a good first step. It's been a goal of ours, as you all know, for some years now to get us to $15 an hour. And frankly, between COVID and market, we've been a little behind. So it's kind of past time to do this. But last year's budget, we felt like we did what we could. This is a little unique. We don't normally do this in the middle of the year. Charleston, some of the other jurisdictions have a fiscal year that starts July 1. And so they're a little ahead of us, and this is playing a little catch up as a matter of fact, but I think it's an important first step. And it also addresses that issue of starting pay, again, not just for non-sworn, but also for our firefighters and our police officers as well. So I believe the process is with this committee's recommendation that we would not formally have a a budget amendment until we do our annual budget amendment. We normally do that after the first of the year in review, but I would like to respectfully include all of council members and ask that we take this to our Ways and Means Committee for our council's approval at our upcoming meeting. Ask staff to put it in effect immediately, as soon as possible.
Mr. Chairman?
I move for approval.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Carl?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask, maybe it's a naive question, but how do we avoid getting in like a pay arms race with the other municipalities in terms of like everyone starts adjusting pay and going up, and it's this kind of revolving cycle where, you know, folks might move from one, you know, especially on the swarm side, from, you know, one department to another, just waiting for the next council to begin raising pay, and then they just kind of rotate around, so that we can make sure that we are fairly compensating all of our employees, especially the sworn employees, but that we're not in this like escalating arms race, which then puts the taxpayers in kind of an awkward position where we're trying to remain competitive while maintaining staffing levels. But we also don't want to be escalating pay necessarily if we don't have to, just based on the fact that, you know, I don't think there's any police officers that are going to go be security guards or anything, you know, but how do we maintain that, like, to make sure that we are keeping pace with our peers, but not trying to create this cycle where pay is just exponentially increasing necessarily against the market?
Well, I don't mind trying to respond to that a little bit, council member. As I just mentioned, I think we're a little behind the curve, to be honest with you, and this is just playing catch up. And the thing that I noted, Ryan, from your presentation a month or two ago, that kind of struck me, and Councilmember Brady, you just referred to it, that a police officer, as you mentioned, is not likely to go to work for a security guard service, but our non-sworn employees are more likely subject to the general labor market or job market. And I think personally, that's why we're seeing such a higher turnover rate among our non-sworn employees. And so it's not just us versus the other jurisdictions, it's us versus trucking companies for CDL drivers, or maintenance companies for landscaping companies for our landscaping employees, and so forth. We're really up against the job market, which is not a good environment right now in a way. But on the other side of looking at it, I really think our employees deserve it. They're the hardest working overall teammates I'm proud to serve with, and I think we need to be adjusting these pay rates and pay plans over the next years. So I'm not scared of arms race, as you mentioned. I think we're playing catch up to a little bit and need to continue to do that for the next year or two.
Any more questions?
Councilmember
Waring has his hand up.
Councilman Waring?
I can agree with the mayor more. Let me ask this. If I were to ask Mr. Fountain, can you take this $15 an hour and hire ditch diggers or people in stormwater department? What would be his answer? I know he I remember when I think we had 7 ditch digging crews and we down to, I think 3, 7 persons per crew. This was a couple months ago. I spoke to him about it. He was just matter of factly saying you can't hire anybody at $13.50 an hour to do that. What would his answer be? Can he hire people at $15 an hour? Or can we hire $15 an hour? I mean, this would be money on the chart, but if we can't get people to come to work for that, then I guess in the mayor's point, which I agree with, we got some more catching up to do.
Well, Councilmember Waring, I don't think that any of us know exactly what this is going to do. I think it will certainly help. I don't think that stormwater is going to all of a sudden go to being 100% staffed in the next 30 days, but I do think that we will get some more employees, and at least as important, we're also increasing the pay of the ones we have now. So I think it's also going to help us retain the ones we do have by increasing their pay.
Maybe I should have answered my question this way. Was Mr. Fountain consulted in any of this?
No, we did not. We did talk to both chiefs, Chief Reynolds and Chief Curry today, because what we're doing, because they have such formal pay plans set up with all the steps, it impacts them a little differently. I can't imagine anybody would be opposed to their employees going from $14 an hour to $15.
Ms. Cross, let me say this. That department has the highest vacancy rate. So I think the person who has an integral part with running that, I think y'all should take his opinion into account. And we need to adjust from there. Because back to Ms. Wharton's point, we're getting this from basically salary savings from positions that were not filled. If we don't fill them, it would stay in that same category, just be at $15 an hour. I think I'd like to, listen, I'm gonna support this, but I don't know whether that's sufficient to put a dent in stormwater and public services in that area, because the mayor's right. Our competition isn't necessarily the city of North Charleston or Mount Pleasant. It is the private sector. So some of the very people that we are contracting to do work for the city, Trident Industries. I mean, they came through my neighborhood the other day picking up trash where it used to be a city of Charleston truck. So I almost feel like some of this, and I really don't want to offend anybody with this because I know a lot of work went into this, but the person who's out there on the firing line, knowing that what they need to get the production done for this city, that head should have been in that huddle coming up with these numbers. So that's all I'm saying with that. So if you can hire them, God bless them. But if you can't, I think we're going to be visiting this real soon.
Well, I think, Councilmember, your point is very valid. I was just thinking of the $15 an hour starting pay. I mean, there's fast food restaurants that are starting somewhat higher than that. So if you're looking at kind of a more manual labor job that the city's offering at $15 an hour versus, a restaurant industry style job, especially in the quick service sector, I can't speak for one way or the other, but if it comes down to hourly pay in your paycheck, why go do manual labor when you can be in the air conditioning for $15 to $19 an hour?
Mr. Chairman, Amy has her hand up.
Yes, Amy.
Councilmember Waring, I just want to say that a lot of this happened when we were looking at this was because of the construction workers, when Ryan was looking at it to see what we could do to help get those positions hired. And looking at it is why this kind of happened. I'll let Ryan or Kay speak to that a little bit more in terms of looking at it and saying, okay, well, if we do this for the this group of people, it's going to cause a problem over in recreations and that's having as much of a vacancy issue. So that's why we kind of brought it forward for everybody. And I understand that $15 an hour right now might not get to where we need to be, but it was more kind of like just over the last few days, we looked at it, haven't had a good chance to talk to any of the department heads before today's meeting. But it was just an attempt to help us kind of limp through, I hate to say it that way, the rest of the year while we're working on something bigger for next year. But we certainly can talk to Mr. Fallon and all the other department heads too, just to get their feedback on it. But I think we all know that this isn't going to do exactly what we need it to do. So we're like, my staff and I were talking, we're thinking, okay, if you have 10 vacancies, this might get us to get 2 or 3 people out of it. Whereas, we were getting 0 before. It's not great, but it's at least a little bit of a step to help us for the rest of the year, was really the thought process.
Well, I understand that, but you said we got salary savings of approximately how much?
Well, we
6
budgeted 6 million, and we're projecting that will be much higher than that.
And
this
out
year.
of that amount, how much are we taking? Is it
almost the $429,000.
so hypothetically, if we took $1 million out of that salary savings that you're projecting to be higher, what could we do?
Well, we would have to look at that, but then you have to remember too, whatever we do now, we're pushing into next year, into 2020.
I do understand that.
Yeah.
Believe me, I hear the mayor, and I'm supporting the mayor when it comes to paying our people more. I mean, I don't think y'all have ever heard. I've been on this council I'm beyond my 11th year. I have never voted against a pay raise for employees because I still feel you're underpaid and overworked. Okay, if there's a way I can find a way to crank it out, I'm there with you. Okay, so my point is talking about these salary savings and having the projection that they're going to even be higher. How does that help us get feet on the ground doing work for the city? I mean, that's nice. I mean, that's on paper, and we'll feel good pushing through a unanimous vote on this. And we don't have to push it through. It's going to go through unanimous. But at the end of the day, there's a work. And I think if we know we got a surplus, and I understand we're going to have to make good on that come 23 going forward because it's an expense that's going to repeat itself. I think we ought to do it. And then number 2, I understand the compression issue, but I'm wondering how many of these job descriptions can be redone? Because I've said that to Councilman Gregory, if I am in recreation, I'm riding on a lawnmower, okay? And I have this is a hypothetical, I may be incorrect on this, but Ms. Cross, if I'm, whatever the pay grade is for me to ride that riding lawnmower in recreation, and my twin brother is a ditch digger. He's down there picking an axe and ducking water moccasins in some area and the juice off of the elephant ear plants that literally burns the skin. I actually think they shouldn't, if they're classified the same, I don't think they should be classified the same.
Well,
Now-
Councilor Waring, I'd like to just make a comment if you would allow me to.
That's fine.
I think if you talk to Jason Kronsberg, I think you might get a better idea. Because our groundskeepers are not just riding lawnmowers. In fact, he had a groundskeeper last year that got bit by a cottonmouth. So our groundskeepers encounter a lot of wildlife, snakes and everything else on a daily basis. Needles in the parks. I mean, they don't just ride lawnmowers. They have pretty hard jobs.
My point is, Ms. Cross, why should the job description be graded where it is? If it has that kind of hazardous aspect to it, that should be reflected in the pay.
Well, it's in grade 6 right now, groundskeepers along with construction workers and stormwater. But with our proposal, they'll be moving to grade 7. So we are reclassifying them. We are upgrading them and increasing their pay.
I think one of the issues is, again, job description to get some of these people in higher categories. That's my point on this one right here. So,
If I may, I totally agree with you, Councilman Waring, that there should be in-depth discussions with department heads to determine, in conjunction with Amy and Kay, If they have that kind of vacancy rate, which can translate into dollars, okay, and I think that's what you're saying, for potentially higher salaries for some of the existing, I think that that is worthy of further discussion. But I do think that what we're attempting to do here, as you know, is just an initial start. It may not work. We're not sure. But I do think that we have to get into the heavier discussions that you're articulating one-on-one with the people who know the jobs, okay, and the risk and all those things. And I think that is a discussion that needs to happen. And of course, that discussion has to be had with our director of HR, who would be able to guide them in terms of how do you do this job description or this classification to get to that salary level or that salary change. So I'm in totally agreement with you that kind of discussion needs to be had with the department heads.
Mr.
Just so
Chairman.
you know, I'm sorry, we do have that. We do have department heads that come to us and ask to realign positions and things like that. So we do have those discussions.
And
Well, let me follow up on that, Mr. Chairman, Amy, if you will. We have those discussions, but does it affect change? Or do they have discussions and the department head gets pushed back?
Well, I mean, we've done a lot of that already, you know, in parks. We've done that with stormwater with some of the requests that Mr. Fallon has come through. I think the ones that you're specifically talking about, we haven't really sat down and worked all that through yet. We keep telling you that Matt and I keep telling you we're going to work on that, and then we get busy and we don't. But we have done a lot of realignment in stormwater, and we've done a lot of it in parks as well. Brian, maybe recreation a little bit too, where we see some of these positions. So we do that.
Thanks. I need the issue of explanation is crossed too. We've been undergoing an audit for the last couple of days. We get audited at our firm, and they just come up once a year, and they just show up. And when they show up, we have to give them our attention. But I will circle back and return your call. So.
I understand audits.
And before you got on, I did talk about my sort of going to various department heads along with the chairman of those committees to have some of the same kinds of discussions that you just articulated. And I think I mentioned to you that my next will be with Matt, you, and Amy. And we may also have Kay in that discussion as well.
Oh, I think we should.
Yes. So my next meeting will be with Matt, similar to what we had with the police chief.
And Mr. Chairman, Ryan's been waiting to speak.
I'm sorry, Ryan.
So just to kind of expand a little on the reclassification thing, when we talk about compression, that ties a lot into this conversation, because what we're going to run into, and what we're really running into already, is we're running into a structural problem where we don't really have room to reclassify anybody else. If we bump one position up a pay grade, in almost all of our departments, there's somebody else in a position in that pay grade already. And so if we're trying to maintain anything like a similar valuation for these people, this is that problem we're running into where we've said we need to fix everybody. Because if we try to fix any one group, stormwater is a great example, because they have 7 or 8 positions that are literally stacked one right after another, pay grade by pay grade. So if you bump the bottom person up, well, now they overlap with the person above them. Do you need to bump that person up? And if you do that, do you need to do the next person? And this is where we've really kind of compressed this thing as probably tightly as we can. And that really kind of impacts our ability to reclassify anything more. Because again, if we bump one person up, they're going to overlap with somebody else that we valued higher. And the only way for us to really truly fix that is to do something through pretty much the entire plan. Because that's really the situation we're in almost every department, is they've got positions stacked one grade after another in almost every grade we have. And so it's really just constricted our ability. And that's part of why we've really talked about that idea of trying to do the whole plan as much as possible. We're squeezing every bit of spare room out of this plan. And to do anything more than that, we've kind of constricted our ability to pick any one group to do that to.
Any more questions on this issue?
And who is the second to the motion?
I don't think there was a second.
I'll second.
Second.
Moved and properly seconded that we forward this to the Ways and Means Committee for consideration. Is there any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? The ayes have it.
All right, so that.
Mr. Chairman, could we just qualify that we're recommending this to Ways and Means for approval?
Okay, for approval.
Not just for consideration. We would like for them to approve.
For approval.
Thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thanks, Mayor.
Yeah.
All right, so
Back to Kay.
So this was our final slide on the job reclassification section. So barring any other discussion, we have just a couple of slides on the last item for new business employee pay discussion. So we've kind of talked about some of these items already, but we wanted to give you kind of a visualization on when we're talking about progression for some of our different positions. What does that look like? So that's what this chart is. So this chart is looking at estimated annual compensation. So this is for all of our full-time staff. If you work all of the hours you're scheduled, what would your earnings for the year be? As with every chart I do, there's a couple of lines and a lot of colors. Blue is police, red is fire. We have 2 for fire because they have an advancement path where if they essentially learn to drive a fire engine, they could move into an assistant engineer position, which is a non-competitive process. It's just a thing that they can essentially do. So the red line is that. The dotted red line is their progression. If they don't do that, police just has the 1. Our non-sworn, so this is the minimum, and we did this chart prior to working up the numbers in the previous slide, so this doesn't reflect those. But as of right now today, this white line is where our $14 an hour employees are at. So they're kind of just below this $30,000 line. The yellow line is, we have used MIT's living wage data in the past. So we pulled their updated information for 2022 about the living wage for Charleston for 1 adult with no children. So that's the yellow line. And then we see solid red line is the fire with advancement. It breaks off into the dotted line without advancement. The dotted white line is just our non-sworn employees' median earnings. So that's median earnings, including both our minimum employees as well as our department heads. Where does that median actually end up? And again, this is just, we wanted to give a better visualization of really what does our pay progression look like when we talk about pay progression. And again, particularly for this white line, especially as we look at our lower grades, you'll notice it's very much just a flat line because we currently really don't have a progression for them in the same way that fire or police might. So, yeah, this is really just to provide that visualization, provide some additional information. And then finally, again, just kind of a reminder, this is our compensation survey results for police and fire, looking at just the high school education level. So we do provide education incentives, which aren't reflected in these measures. And then non-sworn, all with that cost of living factors we've previously discussed. The biggest difference in the slide this time is a number of the other organizations have asterisks next to their name. And these are all organizations that we've been able to confirm have made some kind of pay change since completing the survey. So frankly, whatever number we're at in these charts, it would be safe to assume we are a little lower now. Most of these organizations aren't on July fiscal year. So that tended to be why. They're passing their budget usually in May for a July start. And that's kind of where they got us a little bit. But for the sake of the reminder, and just to clarify again, everybody in Asterisk has done something. So we're probably even a little lower on these numbers than we were at the time. These are just both informational for this last agenda item of the employee pay discussion. So I don't really have anything else in the presentation unless anybody has particular questions.
Thank you again, Ryan.
Absolutely.
Thing, Kay, that you want to bring before us?
Well, I would just like to first of all thank all of you for your time today. I do realize, and believe me, I do not expect going from $14 to $15 an hour to completely solve all our problems. I don't. I think it will help. I think it's a step in the right direction. And I hopefully I will have all of your support. We're going to be working to create some type of mechanism for our non-sworn employees to move through their pay grades, much like sworn police and fire do. Because I think if you look at the turnover, to me, it seems very clear what the biggest issue is that our non-sworn just simply do not have any way to advance. When we didn't have a cost of living because of COVID, police and fire, even though they didn't get a COLA either, they kept progressing, getting their steps even that year, whereas non-sworn got nothing. So that's really what's caused the biggest issue. And so I'd like to start something in January, and I know I'm probably making Ryan's head explode, but we really have got to create something, even if it's just a beginning process that we maybe work on next year and enhance and improve. I really think it's important to take that first step. So I hope I can count on all of you to support me. We'll be developing a plan for that and coming back with you soon.
Okay. Is there anything else to come before, any other business to come before this committee?
Councilman Barry has his hand up.
I have a question. I have more of a,
I didn't see it. Go ahead.
I think it's more of an observation. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Cross, I agree with everything you said. Mr. Mayor, and I think Amy, I'm wondering whether we should have a separate, maybe, I don't know whether, I'll hesitate to say workshop because we have enough of those already. But looking at the overall finances of the city, I may mention this before, Amy, maybe about a month or so ago, as to Ms. Cross, the will to do it, I think, is amongst almost all 13 voters around the council table. I mean, everybody can speak for themselves, but then it becomes, where does the revenue come from? Okay. There's so much we can do through tax increases. Okay. I voted for tax increases in the past to pay for pay raises, and I'll do it in the future. But the limitations there. I don't even know whether we should have a conversation like that in executive session, but I think there may be some other sources out there. I guess some rocks out there if we were to look underneath them, but I remember the last meeting we had, I think we need somewhere around 17, not quite 18 million to bring the pay raises up to the information that we talked about. When I look at the 23 budget, thinking, where's this approximately 18 million going to come from? A few million here, 6 or 7 million there, 8 or 9 there. We need to kind of review our sources of revenue and to see where we can make a more efficiency of, or maybe find 1 or 2 additional sources to access. But so I throw that out to you, Mr. Mayor. I think I know I'm ready to have a conversation like that, but again, maybe we need to do it in executive session or something.
I don't think we have a choice but to identify more revenue streams. I totally agree with you, Councilman. We've got to identify additional And I do think that we need to look at Senate Bill 233, okay, as a possible way of doing that. Because, and I agree with you, Councilmember Waring, we better take advantage of it before everybody else figures it out and it goes away. Because I still think that's the potential of increasing some revenue for the city.
And just, Ms. Cross and others, years ago, the state had this thing called alternative funding for schools. And schools up in Greenville and Spartanburg, man, they used that and they got a bunch of money and redid all their schools. And then the General Assembly, basically, you can raise money for schools without having bond referendums, okay? And you had these private corporations that would build a new school and the districts would lease them for 30 years and I think get them for $1 at the end of the period, 20 years. Anyways, the state saw, wait a minute, too many people doing that. They came back and they stopped it, okay? I happened to be a Charleston County Board of Economic Advisors at the time, and our school district did get $450 million. But man, Greenville, Spartanburg was way ahead of us before they severed that. Councilman Gregory is right. Ross Appel, who's not on here, Councilman Appel has brought this up. This additional fee income aspect that the General Assembly approved, I hope to help municipalities. I think when people really see how good that can be, the people who get in that door will be grandfathered. I hope they don't change it, but just in case they do, I would not want to be in the position of saying, boy, I sure wish we had Mr. Mayor, I wish we had taken advantage of it. So I think you're onto something, Councilman.
And I think that we should be getting something at our next Community Development Committee on how we may be able to use it. But
Right.
It goes beyond that. It's been 2 hours.
Yeah, you're good. You're right. You don't need to go home.
And I think and for me, it shows how important there's a need for us to continue to interact on this committee. Human resources is the bread and butter of this operation. If we can't get bodies to do the work, it's over for us. So I just want to thank Kay and her staff for, taking the time to sort of explain and be creative for us. I really appreciate it. And you and I need to talk a little more often, Kay.
I agree. Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone's participation and support. And I certainly don't want to leave Amy out. Amy, she approved the funding and I very much appreciate that, Amy. Thank you.
All right.
All right,
Anything else?
thank you.
Thanks,
Anything else?
everybody.
Thank you very much.
I think I saw Councilman Waring's hand up. No, he's gone. Okay.
We need a motion to adjourn.
Greg, I like the beard. Grow it.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.